Hello, good evening. I am so excited for the next hour and a bit. Right now, we're about to watch, of course, the first televised debate of the 2024 general election. If you didn't know already, it's the head-to-head, the one-to-one, Keir Starmer versus Rishi Sunak on ITV. I'm Aaron Bastani. I'm joined by the immarketable Ash Sarkar. How are you doing, Ash?
I'm good. I'm glad to see you made it safely back from the mean streets of Godalming.
Oh, it was tough. I almost got caught in the Waitrose deli section, but I made it out somehow with all my body parts intact. Ash, what are you expecting for this evening? Obviously, it's just the two candidates fundamentally who will be the next prime minister, unless something very strange happens. What are you keeping your antennae out for? Who has the most to lose? Who has the most to gain?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that dispositionally, Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer can be quite similar. They do both get very tetchy when under pressure. There's not a lot that's going to be dividing them on policy. So I imagine that it's going to be a lot of what we've heard before from Starmer in terms of the incompetence and chaos of the Conservative governments. Expect to hear a lot about Liz Truss's disastrous mini budget. And I think from Rishi Sunak, if he's smart, he'll try and corner Keir Starmer on consistency and honesty. But I get the feeling he's going to try and pigeonhole him as same old Labour. So you're still the man who stood on a platform with Jeremy Corbyn and trying to really tie him to the 2019 result.
I think that's right. And I feel like, I don't know what your view on this is, Ash, that both men actually stand a lot to lose. I don't feel like anybody really stands to gain very much here. If Rishi Sunak has a very bad debate, I mean, look, let's be honest, the campaign's already over for the Conservative Party, but it could really be curtains. There has been talk over the last 24 hours of Conservative candidates switching over to Reform. I think if it's a car crash tonight, that would only help facilitate that. And I think with Keir Starmer, look, it's questionable how much this can help him, given the polling we've seen over the last several days, particularly one, I think, today, just this evening, Salvation put the Conservatives in the 70s. That's not percentage points, that's seats for July 4th. And I feel like Starmer as well only has something to lose here. I think a score draw or a ball draw would suit both men, but there are people waiting on the wings, the Lib Dems and the Greens when it comes to the Labour vote, the Lib Dems and Reform when it comes to the Tory vote, that actually I don't see really what positive gains can be made here. And maybe that's what makes it interesting, right? If Rishi Sunak goes for a knockout punch with Keir Starmer, we could see something interesting. Other than that, I suspect it would be dull. If I was Rishi Sunak, I'd be doing exactly that. He's got nothing to lose at this point, but he is a man who consistently surprises me in terms of his poor judgment, so we'll have to see. For all you out there at home, I want to know as well, put it in the YouTube super chats, what do you think is needed to change the dial, to turn the dial, to shift this debate towards the Conservatives? Is that even possible? Ash, what's your view on that? Is there a Hail Mary that Rishi Sunak could take on this evening, or is that simply implausible?
I just think it's implausible at this point. My genuine read of that absolutely pathetic general election announcement of Rishi Sunak's, just a few weeks ago now, was that this is a man who well and truly has given up. You only stand there in the rain without an umbrella, announcing a general election like the saddest dog tied up outside of a supermarket if you don't want the job anymore. So I don't think there is a Hail Mary, and I don't necessarily think that he'd take it even if it was available. I don't think he likes being prime minister, and it's not the job that he dreamt it would be.
Yeah, I still cannot fathom why we're having a general election now. And that's really been confirmed with the return of Nigel Farage. If you have an election in early November, Rishi, Nigel is off gallivanting with Donald Trump across the Atlantic. There was so many, I was saying this on the day the election was called, we were talking about it on Slack. Colleagues were saying, will there be an election? I said, no way. It'll be November because rates will be down, probably. Poorer weather makes for a better get out of the vote campaign for Labour. And perhaps most importantly, it's going to give the Tories 1 or 2%. There is zero chance of Nigel Farage getting back on the pitch. But Sunak knew better. And so far, that bet doesn't seem to be playing out particularly well. We're going to go to this in a moment. But just to reaffirm what I said a moment ago, we will have your YouTube super chats come up during the show. And there will be breaks where we play those too. And we'll try not to talk too much. We obviously want to hear what these men say, but if there's something really insightful coming from you guys, we will absolutely respond to it. We should be going over to that conversation shortly. There is, of course, another debate on Friday that will be with 7 party candidates, I believe. Although, interestingly, the BBC's done the promotion for that. And guess who they didn't include? Carla Denyer and Adrian Ramsey of the Greens. But of course, Nigel Farage was there. That should be really interesting because I think the Greens will attack Labour, Reform will attack the Conservatives, the Lib Dems will say, what a mess, we're the sensible people in the middle. And of course, the SNP will be really desperate to lay their claws into Labour, given they are set to lose potentially dozens of seats up in Scotland. There are other debates too going forward before July the 4th. But this arguably is the single best opportunity Rishi Sunak is going to have in terms of discrediting Keir Starmer, in terms of trying to claw his way back into this general election campaign. It's been, as Ash said, an abysmal start. You couldn't make it up at points, actually. Probably the worst start to any general election campaign ever. And yes, I'm including 2010, when there was a literal car crash as Labour announced their manifesto. This, I think, is far beyond that. I think we'll be going over there shortly. Right now, we have 4,000 of you watching. Fantastic. By the way, Novara will be streaming all night on general election night on July the 4th. We got 100,000 viewers over the course of our coverage in 2019. I want 1 million. I want 1 million views on election night in 2024. This is where I get somebody in my ear saying, Aaron, what the hell are you talking about? I think we can do it. And if you want to support our work, by the way, between now and July the 4th, and probably thereafter too, might help, you can go to novaramedia.com/support. I think there is a link in the description below. We're trying to build a new media for different politics. We focus on the policy, we focus on the detail, and we don't just swallow whatever nonsense line the entire media is bandwagoning around. We're going to go to that debate right now.
We're live in Salford for the very first time in this election. It's Sunak versus Starmer, the ITV debate. It's the first head-to-head debate in the 2024 general election with these two men who want to run the country, Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. Well, good evening. Tonight's debate is set against the toughest of backdrops. Since the UK last went to the polls, we've had a pandemic, Putin's invasion of Ukraine, and a cost of living crisis which is still hitting families hard. Huge geopolitical threats loom large, not least, of course, climate change. We all know how tough it's been. We don't need the politicians to remind us. So what are these two men going to offer us? Who are they? And why should they earn our vote? Can they level with us when we know that finances are almost impossibly tight? Later tonight, you'll be able to see what other parties are offering when they're interviewed live on ITV1 by Anushka Astana. And the conversation will continue on the national and regional news. But now let's get on with tonight's debate. Keir Starmer, your opening statement, please.
Thank you very much. This election is all about a choice. More of the chaos and division we've seen for the last 14 years, or turning the page and rebuilding with Labour. I have ambition for our country and have a practical plan to deliver it. I've changed the Labour Party and put it back in the service of working people. Now I'm seeking your backing to change our country, to make it work once again for you and your family?
Thank you. Rishi Sunak.
Uncertain times call for a clear plan and bold action. So I'll keep this simple. In 5 weeks, either Keir Starmer or I will be Prime Minister. Beyond
Yes,
raising
that's
your
called an
taxes
election, Rishi.
and raiding your pensions, no one knows what Labour would actually do. But you know what I would do. I'll cut your taxes, protect your pension, and reduce immigration. I have a clear plan for a more secure future for you and your family.
Thank you, Rishi Sunak. Well, we invited viewers from right across the country to submit questions. We have independently selected the questioners here with us this evening. I'll also raise some points made by people who couldn't be here. The two leaders don't know what they'll be asked. Also here, people who'll listen to tonight's debate. Some have voted Conservative and Labour in the past and think they will do so on July the 4th. And some have voted for other parties or are undecided. You can join the debate wherever you are by using the hashtag ITV debate. And just before we go to our first question, a reminder that each leader will have 45 seconds to respond initially. Now, our first question on the cost of living, Paula from Huddersfield. Paula.
Good evening, both. I have worked since I was 15 years old, and at the moment I hold a full-time, stable job. My children have left home. In the last few years, I found it very difficult to make ends meet, and the money simply doesn't go far enough. All I do is work to live. My food bill is nearly doubled. I'm in arrears with my bills. I spend my weekends batch cooking, so I don't have to turn on my oven.
Powerful or what? What an introduction.
My savings are gone, and I'm genuinely worried about my future. I don't think you actually understand how this is for people like me. So what can you do about that?
Thank you very much indeed, Paula, for your question. Rishi Sunak.
Well, Paula, I know how much of a strain the last few years have put on your family finances, the family finances of everyone in our country.
He's only a billionaire.
And that's why my priority has
Of course he
always
does.
been to do what I can to support you.
What a strain. Yeah, I thought about that on the Peloton this morning.
During the pandemic, and more recently, my clear plan to bring inflation back to normal. And now, our economy is growing again, wages are rising, and crucially, we are able to now start cutting your taxes.
You can't tell this lady that everything's going well when she's just told you she's really struggling.
So the choice at this election is with my clear plan and bold action to keep cutting your taxes, to give you financial security, or put
avoid the chaos, stick with the plan. It's like, the plan is making me poorer, you schmuck.
worth of higher taxes under the Labour Party.
Thank you, Rishi Sunak. Keir Starmer.
Paula, I'm really sorry to hear the position that you're in. It must be really, really difficult on a daily basis. There'll be millions of people watching this who feel in a similar position to you, that the cost of living crisis is really bearing down on them with constant worry. I'm not going to pretend that Ukraine and COVID hasn't made things worse, but this government has lost control. Liz Truss crashed the economy. They made it worse here than in other countries, and it's people like you that are paying the price, because if a government loses control of the economy, as they have, it's working people that pay the price. And Liz Truss's advisors are in the House of Lords. She's going to be a candidate at the next election. Rishi Sunak
Take a shot every time you hear the name Liz
We've got
Truss.
to stop this chaos. Got to stop the division. Turn a page.
Or don't,
and start
because you'll be
to rebuild
hospitalised.
under Labour.
Thank you for those opening statements, 45 seconds each. Just to turn to you first, Keir Starmer, the point that Rishi Sunak made is the economy is growing again. The plan is working, is his view.
Well, he says the plan is working. He says the plan is working. So the question for him is, why has he called the election now? Because if he thinks things are going to get better towards the second half of this year, why has he called it now? He's called it now because he knows, and I'll ask him this, he knows inflation is going to go back up. He knows energy prices are going to go back up in the autumn. That's what he's not telling you. So he says the plan is working, but I don't think he believes the plan is working, because if he thought the plan is working, he wouldn't have called this election right now.
Rishi Sunak.
I think it's slightly ironic, because from the moment I got this job, Keir Starmer was telling me, call an election, call an election. And now that we've called an election, he's saying, oh no, don't have an election, because I don't want to tell you what I'm going to do. And this is the choice. This is the choice for everybody. The plan is working. Of course I know everyone is only just starting to feel the benefits of it, but inflation is back to normal, wages are growing, taxes are now being
Who's
cut.
feeling the
Keir
benefit?
Starmer would put all
Any
that
of you
progress
feeling the benefit?
at
I'm not
risk.
feeling the fucking
He would
benefit.
put up everyone's taxes by
Well, Rishi did make
£2,000.
£2.2 million in
£2,000
2023, so, you know,
for
perhaps...
every working family in our country, after all the hard work and sacrifice we've been through, that's not the right course of action. I don't know why you want to put up people's taxes.
Keir Starmer.
Paul, I just don't know how you feel when you hear a Prime Minister say, having heard what you're going through, that the plan is working, it's all... So many people who are struggling with their bills, and the Prime Minister just keeps saying he lives in a different world, that
Could you,
the corner's turned and it's all
if people
right.
are struggling with their bills, why do you want to make it harder for them by saddling them with £2,000 worth of higher taxes? How is that going to make Paula or anyone's life easier?
Could you respond directly to Rishi Sunak?
This is the Prime Minister who's been part of a government that has put up tax 26 times. The last manifesto that they had in 2019 said we won't put up national insurance. This man then
this is a great start from Starmer, right, Ash?
He's the British expert
Looks very calm,
on tax rises.
looks very confident. He's
level
talking
for 70
directly to the
years.
questioner,
And he's got the gall to say
and
other people
is
are going to.
I know you're going to hear a lot
making
about
Rishi
the past
Sunak a kind
in
of
this election,
inert
but this
totem.
election is about
And it's
the
frustrating
future. This
Sunak,
election
you can
is about
tell.
the future, and I'm clear that I'm going to keep cutting people's taxes as we now
doesn't seem like the Prime Minister.
You
It's
want to
weird.
put everyone's taxes up by
Thank you.
£2,000, and this is really important.
Yeah.
Independent Treasury officials have costed Labour's policies, and they amount to a £2,000 tax rise for every working family.
Wait,
No, this is important. Mark my words. Labour will raise your taxes. It's in their DNA. Your work, your car, your pension.
Thank you. Okay,
you name it.
Sorry,
Labour will tax it.
I'm just going to draw breath there a moment, please, gentlemen. We're going to be talking about tax again later on.
I just
want to bring this part of the debate back very firmly to Paula's question. She made it very clear how hard her life is at the moment. You did acknowledge it, both of you. She spends her weekends batch cooking so she doesn't have to turn her oven on during peak times. There is worry here right before our eyes that were being echoed across the country. One of the key points that Paula says is this: I don't think you understand how hard it is for people like me. What are you going to do about it? How do you actually connect with Paula? Rishi Sunak.
Well, I'd ask everyone to judge me by my actions. You saw what I did during the pandemic. When disaster struck our country, I implemented the furlough scheme because I knew the impact, devastating impact it would have on people. And you know what? Every week when I'm out and about, someone comes up to me and tells me how
what you did
furlough
yesterday.
saved their family, saved their home, because that's who I am. And I don't want to put that progress at risk. I want to keep delivering financial security by cutting people's taxes.
Thank you.
Whereas the Labour Party want to
Sunak.
keep putting people's taxes up, and that's not going to help anyone overcome the challenges they're facing.
Paula wants to know what you're going to do about it.
Yeah, well, I think what
Starmer.
you put to the Prime Minister is how does he connect? And Paula, what I would say is this. My dad worked in a factory. He was a toolmaker.
My dad was a toolmaker.
Here we go.
Mark that on your bingo card.
And we were in a position on occasion where we couldn't pay our bills.
This is the thing about Starmer. Sunak is so weak that Starmer looks strong, but what he's doing right now is dodging Paula's question. He's being asked what he'd do about it.
What's interesting is off the cuff, he was actually quite impressive. Dare I say almost affable. When he goes down that route, I know you have to repeat yourself ad infinitum in politics, so everybody hears it. But that just seems so... It sounds like a politician. People don't like politicians.
Election is about the future and making people's lives better.
Then why are you talking about furlough? It's about the future. I did this thing 3 years ago.
That Paula and everyone is facing, because things are tough. I want to make them easier by continuing to cut your taxes. The difference at this election is Keir Starmer is going to put your taxes up by £2,000.
Thank you.
So if people
Sunak's
are
coming
worried
across
about
terribly, but he has said something concrete he'd do: cut taxes. Name one thing Starmer said he's going to do.
Thank you. I'm not going to help any of those things.
Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. I am going to draw a line under this part of the debate. We're going to be talking about tax again later on, and also to both of you we'll be talking about that. Paula, thank you very much indeed for your question. We're now going to go to the issue of health and social care, which, like some other
Nobody used to
issues
say
that
that.
come up in tonight's debate, is a devolved
the Rory
area.
Stewart
That means
issue.
policies set
It's you, and negotiations. After Brexit, everybody said negotiations.
Policy for England. So our next question is about the health service, and it's from Janet from Telford. Janet.
Thank you. I've interacted more with the NHS lately than the average person. I'm a cancer survivor. My son is a nurse. I recently lost a cousin who was waiting for surgery. No one is brave enough to tell us the truth. The NHS is broken. Be honest with us. How long will it take to fix it?
Thank you very much indeed. Janet, Keir Starmer.
Janet, I'm really sorry to hear about your own position and that of your relatives. My wife works in the NHS in one of the big London hospitals. My mum was a nurse, my sister was a nurse, so the DNA, it runs through my DNA. And you can imagine just how angry I am that it's been broken, and it has been broken exactly as you describe. It's unforgivable what's happened to the NHS, and to come into power for 14 years and leave the NHS in a worse state than when you found it is unforgivable in politics. And Rishi Sunak stood 18 months ago, Janet, and said that those waiting lists, which are now nearly 8 million, he said he'll get them down. He made a promise. He said he'd be held accountable. They were 7.2 million at the time. Now they're 7.5 million. So they've gone up, and that bears down on the NHS.
Thank Rishi Sunak.
Well, Janet, thank you for sharing your story, and I'm glad that you've recovered. And I'm sorry for your loss as well. Now, my dad was a GP. My mum was a pharmacist. So I'm speaking as someone who was brought up in the NHS, surrounded by people who dedicated their lives to it. And the evenings in my house growing up, my parents spoke about how they could provide more care for their patients, like you. And that's how I think about the NHS.
Peter.
And of course it's difficult,
Well, my
and you're
dad was
right,
a
and we have to be
syringe.
honest about the damage that COVID has done and the time it will take to recover from that. But we've put record funding in, we're training more doctors and nurses, we're doing more checks and scans, and what I want you to know is that the NHS is safe in my hands. I will always stand up for it to give you and everyone else the peace of mind that it will be there for you and your families when you need it.
Thank you very much. Janet put this question. Keir Starmer agreed with the part of that question that the NHS is broken. Your response to that, Rishi Sunak?
Well, as Janet knows and everyone knows, the NHS is still recovering from COVID. We went through the best part of 2 years where the NHS couldn't conduct all the treatments it normally would, and it is going to take time to recover from that.
Nobody's
but we are
asked
now
the
making
question.
progress. The waiting list.
We just heard like family stories. This is your life.
I didn't mention to you, which you did, Julie.
Waiting list 7.2 million, they're now 7.5 million. He says they're coming down, and this is the guy who says he's good at maths.
Yeah, they are now coming down. They are now coming down.
7.2 when you said you get them down, 7.2 million, they're now 7.5 million. I'd like you to explain how they're coming down.
Because they were coming
There
down
we
from
go,
where they
Keir
were.
Starmer,
Starmer
comedian.
said, quick maths, bitch.
They are down, right? Yes, because the NHS was impacted by industrial action. And if it wasn't for that...
Yeah, because you wouldn't give the junior officer a pay rise, you
Somebody
moron.
else's fault.
No, but let me address the question, because, as you said, Julie, the NHS has devolved. So different parties are responsible for the NHS in different parts of the United Kingdom. Keir Starmer's party are responsible for it in Wales. Now, the NHS has been impacted by COVID everywhere. But things are difficult in England, I know that. But if you were in Wales, you would be waiting 40% longer for treatment. Ambulance and A&E times are the worst in Great Britain, and 1 in 4 people are on a waiting list. So yes, the NHS has challenges, but it has challenges everywhere, regardless of the party that's in charge.
I'm looking at Janet's response when all the Prime Minister can say to her is that what the position is in Wales. Janet, I don't know. You may not be interested in the position in Wales. You may be interested in the position that you're facing and want a Prime Minister who takes responsibility for what he is responsible for. But what you'll get with the Prime Minister is somebody who makes a promise saying, I will be held personally responsible for bringing those waiting lists down. Yeah. At the moment they don't come down, what does he do? He blames everybody else.
Keir Starmer,
what did personal responsibility actually mean?
Sorry, can I just intervene there and ask very specifically then?
Keir Starmer to get started on broken promises, eh? He makes it a virtue.
Can you answer that very directly to Rishi Sunak?
We've got to resolve them, and for months and months and months, the Prime Minister hasn't resolved them. They've been arguing about who gets in the room. You've got to get in the room, you've got to resolve it, because the NHS needs to get back to work. But we've also got to bring down the waiting list. We've got a plan for 40,000 extra appointments each and every week. That's 2 million a year to bring those waiting lists down. They're at a record high. And under the last Labour government, the record was waiting lists right down, satisfaction in the NHS at a record high. That's completely been turned on its head.
OK, Rishi Sunak.
I'm really grateful for everyone in the NHS for working so hard, and we have now settled pay rises with everyone in the NHS, except for the junior doctors. And of course I want to do that, to make sure it's fair and affordable though. But despite being offered the most generous pay settlement anywhere in the NHS, and indeed the public sector, the union are demanding a 35% pay rise, and I don't want to raise your taxes.
He doesn't look like he slept, huh?
I don't think it's right. But I will say this.
His eyes are quite
Looks
bloodshot.
bad. Looks real bad.
His eyes are really
When
bloodshot.
Keir Starmer says he'll resolve it, he hasn't explained to you how. But I
OK,
will say
perhaps
this.
you
The
could
British...
answer that, Keir Starmer.
Well, we wouldn't pay the 35%. We've already said that to the doctors. We can't afford it because the government's already broken the economy. And there are many things that now can't be
Broken the
afforded.
economy. They broke the economy.
What we can't do is what the Prime Minister has done, which is to
Well,
say...
you just said you'd resolve it, so what would you do?
At the end of the
So
day...
you're not going to give them the 35% pay rise that they're asking for, so how would you resolve it?
Look,
Just standing there and saying, I'll resolve it, isn't an answer. That's not a plan.
Prime Minister...
How would you resolve it?
Prime Minister, your record is...
Well, no, how would you resolve it? You want to be Prime Minister.
Here we go.
How would you resolve the strike?
I wish he had
How would you resolve them?
I wish he had as much to say when Liz Truss was crashing the economy.
Could you answer Rishi Sunak's point,
That
please,
looks
Keir
so
Starmer?
evasive.
I will when I can get a word in edgeways.
So evasive.
His record is of saying, I'm not going to get in the room to negotiate.
He's just
And what have we
filibustering,
got?
right?
No, we've been in the room to
What
negotiate.
have we got? Ongoing
Let him
strikes.
answer.
We have to end these strikes.
How?
The grown-up way to do that is to get in the room and to negotiate with the doctors and come to a settlement. There's only two ways forward. One is a continuing strike, which is what we've had for a very, very long time. We're now 4.5 weeks from election. He's going to kick it into the long grass.
Right.
Or you get grown up, you go in the room and you resolve this. That does not mean you agree with the 35%. We can't afford that.
Thank you.
But we have got to settle
But
it.
on
If
this
it were a
point-
different Conservative Party leader in different circumstances, they'd make mincemeat out of Keir Starmer. He's evasive, he doesn't like being pushed on specifics, and he'll throw in a Liz Truss bomb in order to obfuscate. Now, it's Sunak's unique weakness, both as an individual and because of the conditions his government are in, that he can't properly capitalise on it.
Yes.
Keir Starmer.
No.
Absolutely no if your loved one was on a waiting list for surgery.
No.
Thank you very much.
I don't use private health.
Okay.
I use the NHS. That's where my wife works, in one of the big hospitals. As I say, it runs through my DNA.
OK, thank you.
Private health.
Thank you. We've had the answers to that very clearly. And I just want to pause there to move on to a different aspect of the debate on the NHS. Everyone knows that fixing the NHS depends on fixing social care. 5 years ago, Boris Johnson was standing where you both are now. He told me there was a plan ready to go on this. We're still waiting. Will you both now commit to a fully funded solution in your manifesto this time round? Yes or no? Rishi Sunak.
Yes, well, we've already implemented charging reform. Pilots are in place to implement the reforms. They will be rolled out later this year, fully next year.
It'll be fully funded in your manifesto.
We've already given social care an extra $8 billion because the pressures are immediate.
Thank you.
And the pilot reforms are there for charging.
OK,
Sounds very
we heard that
deflated.
answer. Yes or no?
We will have a plan for social care, and like everything else in our manifesto, it'll be fully costed and fully funded. It starts with the workforce because, as you know, one of the biggest problems in social care is that the workforce is fragmented, poor conditions, and many, many people.
Thank you.
Well, you talk about the workforce. If I could just pick up on this workforce question, because it is important, because there's no way to get Janet and everyone else the care they need without a workforce.
OK.
But the British Medical Association has warned that Keir Starmer's pension tax risks an exodus of doctors, because we're talking about doctors from the NHS.
OK, we are going to... No, gentlemen,
well, no,
please.
it's all joined up.
Actually,
but it's all joined up, but this is an important point.
Thank you very much indeed. We're going to come on to tax very shortly. I am going to say, yes, tax will run through a lot of what we're discussing this evening. We will return very specifically to it. And I just want to stay on the issue of public services and take a quick fire on education. OK, we've had Harry, a message from Harry, who's a teacher just starting out, and Deborah, who has been a primary school head for 40 years. They've both been in touch with us to tell us effectively the same thing, that they cannot believe how bad things are in their sector. They want to know what you can do for them. Rishi Sunak.
Yes, well, I think education is the most powerful way that you can transform people's lives. That was something that my parents raised me with, and I'm grateful to all our teachers for what they're doing, which is why we're backing our schools with record investment at the moment.
The tone from Sunak is so off, because his default is like 90s kids TV presenter, and everybody's saying, my life is shit, everything's going wrong, nothing works, what are you going to do about it? And he's having to be like, well, you know, not everybody's a billionaire, Rishi. If he could like be straight with people, I think it would actually help him.
The Prime Minister has already said in the first however many minutes of the debate that he doesn't want to have anything to do with the last 14 years. I'm sorry, Prime Minister, you may want to just cast it off, but everybody else is living with it. When it comes to schools, we desperately need more teachers, because in secondary schools, we do not have the teachers we need. So, for example, on key issues like maths, we have maths being taught, parents watching this will know, by supply teachers, by PE teachers, but not maths teachers. So we would have
6,500 new teachers policy, I reckon. He's not going to drop it. He's going to name it.
Teachers who are struggling to cope with the mess that this government has left them in.
So tell Rishi Sunak why you're going to raise VAT on private schools to achieve the money that you say you will spend on those extra teachers. Why are you making that choice? Tell Rishi Sunak.
Because I believe every child should have the teachers they need in the core subjects like maths. And I think for a child in a state secondary school who doesn't have a core teacher in something like maths is going to live with that for the rest of their lives. It's not a 1-year problem or a 2-year problem. If they're in their GCSEs, it's for life. And therefore, we will have 6,500 recruits. Okay. We will get rid of the tax break on private schools to pay for it. That's a tough choice. I do understand that. Yeah. It's a tough choice.
Rishi Sunak.
But I want to make sure that
the reason why it's good is that for the first time he's talking about something tangible.
Yeah.
It's a real policy.
Yeah. I don't agree with it, because I think people who work hard and aspire to provide that education for their kids should have that freedom. That's what my parents did.
Freedom from paying the VAT.
Keir Starmer is going to raise taxes. But that's just the start, because there's a long list of other things that he needs to find the money for. So it's not just going to start and stop there. There are £2,000 worth of tax rises coming for every working family in this country. And as I said, he's saying he's going to raise taxes.
I do need to
that's
answer
not the start, and that's not the end.
I do need to answer that, because he put that figure out there. Well, what's happened here is, it's a classic. They put in pretend Labour policies to the Treasury, and then they get a false readout. So I'll just tell you, what they've put in for this analysis is a mental health policy that isn't the Labour Party's policy. He's put in one of his own policies. He's asked the civil service to cost it, and they've come up with this figure of £2,000. They
are an independent civil service.
I think in terms...
Put it twice, I do need to deal with
it. Gentlemen, please, may I just say that people can have a lot of figures to get their heads around tonight. I'm not saying that people are more than capable of calculating that rapidly at home, but I do want to
in 3 minutes.
Focus then, given we're on this patch, very specifically onto the question of tax. I want to talk very specifically about tax before we finish this first half of our debate. Can we clarify the similarities in your positions? Please raise your hand if I am wrong. You, as Prime Minister, will not raise income tax. You will not raise national insurance in the next Parliament. And other than Labour on private schools, you will not raise VAT. Thank you for that instructive moment. We've had a lot of viewers getting in touch to ask, where is the money coming from to solve the huge challenges raised by Paula, Janet, and many others?
Could say a wealth tax.
You two gentlemen,
we know that's not his position anymore.
Honest.
We will raise specific taxes, and we've been really clear what they are. We've already dealt with the tax break on private schools. We want to end the non-dom status completely. I think that the super rich should be paying their tax. I want to get rid of the equity loopholes that are there, again, for the super rich. And I think the oil and gas companies should be paying their fair share towards our energy. So we will raise those, but we won't raise the others.
Rishi Sunak.
Yes, well, we have already scrapped the non-dom regime, and we have a 75% windfall tax
you've left
on energy companies. But independent Treasury civil servants have costed Labour's policies, and it's £2,000. But you asked for specifics, Julie. So let's have a specific difference.
Please let Mr. Sunak finish.
The triple lock plus, so that we raise the personal allowance for pensioners and ensure that the state pension is never subject to tax. That's all you'll get under a future Conservative government. Keir Starmer hasn't matched that pledge, which means for the first time in our country's history, if Labour are elected, pensioners will pay tax. I do not think that is right, and you should explain to everyone why you think pensioners will be paying a retirement tax under your government.
Briefly, please,
What the Prime Minister's done so far in the 2 weeks of this campaign is to make desperate gimmicks and put them on the table. He's told us he's going to get rid, it's their policy to get rid of national insurance altogether. That's £46 billion. He said it's their policy to get rid of inheritance tax. That's £10 billion. He says he's going to get rid of tax on pensioners.
You're just talking nonsense. But just answer the specific question. We have committed, I can tell you...
Thank you, not over each other. Thank you, not over each other.
No, but we've committed to the Triple Lock Plus. Under us, the state pension will never pay tax. Under you, there's a retirement tax coming for British pensioners. I think it's appalling. Explain to people, why do you think pensioners should pay tax on the state pension?
Okay.
The big problem with Liz Truss is that she made unfunded tax cuts.
All right.
The Prime Minister is doing the same thing. We're going to go round the circle again.
Heard everyone.
Did
you asked about it.
It's
very clear.
name as a get-out clause.
Under Keir Starmer, will
I
pay
thought there's a
tax
shift
on the
in
state
mood in the
pension
room.
for the first time in our country's history.
All right, I'm going to just
It is a retirement tax, and Keir Starmer can talk about the past all he wants, but in the future, pensioners have got a tax rise coming under your government.
All right, gentlemen,
why
please.
do you want to do that to pensioners? Why do you want to put up their taxes?
We're just going to take a pause there. I just want to put this on the table. The Institute for Fiscal Studies independently has assessed that you are joining in a conspiracy of silence in not acknowledging the scale of the choices and trade-offs that will face us after the election. Unprotected budgets, that's budgets for areas outside of schools, the NHS and defence. They could face up to 4% of cuts a year. One word, can you rule those cuts out? Are you being level with us? One word with us, yes or no?
We're going to continue investing record sums in public services.
I ask yes or no?
No, we're not going to go back to austerity. I ran a public service for 5 years, the Crown Prosecution Service. I know how hard it is.
Thank you very much
when you don't have enough money. I believe in our public service.
Thank you, Keir Starmer. Thank you, Rishi Sunak, for the time being.
DPP. My mum was a nurse. My dad was a tool maker.
After the break, we'll be discussing immigration,
My
climate,
sister was a Whitehall
and we'll
department.
take a closer look at what sort of leader
Also,
Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer would be. Don't go away.
Don't go away. Stay right here at Novara Media. We've got 12,000 of you watching. 12,300 watching here at Novara Media. If you like our work, support it. Of course, go to novaramedia.com/support. The link is in the description below. We will be covering this election in a very unique way between now and July the 4th. Our work is always unique. That's a polite way of putting it. Ash, I'm going to come to your thoughts in a moment. Go to the Super Chats first. Very interesting. Very interesting debate. Super Chats. I can't see the Super Chats. I don't know why. Here we go. Yes. Jake Strafford with £5 from before the debate. We're basically going to see two snakes having the most anticlimactic debate ever. There's still time. I wouldn't say it's an anticlimax. They're both quite boring. I was surprised at how adept Keir Starmer was and how tired little Rishi looks. With £10, I don't see the point of this debate at all. They are the same party. Am I wrong? Yes, there are subtle differences, but they aren't worth mentioning. The Fairy Godfather with £2. I was a human rights lawyer for £100. UV Power with £10. Love your channel, as I'm a communist myself. The utter disgust on Ash Sarkar's face, these two establishment status quo neoliberal capitalist thieves, is too funny. Altitude with £2. Rishi's only hope is a spectacular Starmer blunder. Ash, what are your thoughts?
Well, so far, round one absolutely goes to Keir Starmer. He clearly got under Rishi Sunak's skin. He looks tetchy. He looks rattled. And in between topics, you can see that he's struggling to reset himself. So that return to, 1990s kids TV presenter from topic to topic is looking more and more strained. Where I think Sunak did graze a glove on Starmer was when he kept saying, well, what are you going to do about it when it came to the NHS waiting list and the role that the junior doctors' strikes may or may not have played in that. Keir Starmer became evasive. He, smashed that big red button, which is labelled mention Liz Truss. And I think that shows his real weakness. Other than Some individual policies like the windfall tax on oil and gas, imposing VAT on private school fees, he really, really, really doesn't have a plan that he's willing to talk about at this point, and it makes him look shifty. And as I mentioned earlier, any other Tory party leader in any other set of circumstances would have been able to make mincemeat out of Starmer. It's because Rishi Sunak, I think, has some quite individual weaknesses, which are specific to himself. I don't think he was ever a particularly strong politician. I think that he was a figment of the media, but also he assumed leadership of the Conservative Party after, well over a year of month-on-month poll decline. So a bad time to take the job.
I think that's true. And anybody who remembers before the 2019 general election, there was a Channel 4 climate debate between him and Rebecca Long-Bailey, and she destroyed him. And I always thought, hey, well, look, you can't on the one hand say Rebecca Long-Bailey's not a credible politician if she's just destroyed this guy who's about to be the Prime Minister. And I think your point as well about Starmer struggling against any other Tory over the last 10, 15 years or whatever, I think that's absolutely true. Can you imagine Starmer Farage one-on-one? Or even Starmer Galloway one-on-one, right? It can come from the radical right or from his left or whatever. We're going to go back to them right now. Immigration and other topics coming up.
The ITV debate, the first half was dominated by the cost of living and public services. Just a little information for both of our candidates here. Please, an appeal from me not to speak over one another. We want to make sure that everybody can hear what you're saying. That was a gentle reminder. It may not be so gentle next time. We now turn to another important issue in this election, and that is immigration. And our next questioner is Stephen from Warrington. Stephen.
Thank you. Politicians have broken so many promises on immigration. Why should I trust either of you to do anything about such large numbers of people risking their lives to cross the Channel to gain access to the UK illegally?
Thank you very much indeed, Stephen. Rishi Sunak.
Stephen, immigration is too high, and we will need to take bold action to bring it down, whether that's legal migration, where we're going to introduce a new legal cap to guarantee that it will come down every year, or the boats, which you mentioned, where we got the numbers down last year by a third, and now we have a deterrent ready to go. Migrants have been detained, the flights will go in July, but only if I'm your Prime Minister. If Keir Starmer's elected, all those people will be released, the flights will be cancelled, and we will have no deterrent to stop the unfairness of people crossing in boats. So that's the choice for you at this election. Stick to our plan, and illegal migrants
conflation
will be
of
on those
legal and illegal
Labour,
immigration here. I mean, they're not even pretending anymore.
Thank you very much, Rishi Sunak. Keir Starmer.
Well, Stephen, the levels of migration are at record highs. 685,000. It's never been that high, save in the last year or two. The Prime Minister says it's too high. Well, who's in charge? Who's in charge? He's the most liberal Prime Minister we've ever had on immigration. We've never had numbers like this before. And he says that you can believe him.
This is really key.
Nobody should be making
Keir Starmer was defending a single labour market across more than 400 million people in the European Union. But apparently, he wants to reduce immigration. Crazy. What does this guy believe in?
This year alone, 10,000 people have crossed on boats. That's a record number. So again, he's made a promise and he's completely failed to keep it.
Thank you. Rishi Sunak, respond directly to Keir Starmer.
Yeah. Over the last 12 months, the number of crossings have down a third because the plans we put in place are starting to make a difference. But the choice of this election is about the future. I believe you need to have a deterrent. The only way to stop this problem is to say to people who come here illegally, they cannot stay and they will be removed. If I'm your Prime Minister, the planes will go to Rwanda, we will have a deterrent. So the simple question for Keir Starmer is, what will you do with people who come here illegally? What will you do with them? Well, very simply, what will you do with them? That's what I'm going to do. We'll have a deterrent. What are you going to do?
We need to smash the gangs that are running this vile trade, making a huge amount of money putting some of the most vulnerable people in boats across the Channel. They're making a fortune. Before I was a politician, Stephen, I was the Director of Public Prosecutions, and I worked with the police and prosecutors in other countries to bring down terrorist gangs who are running across borders. I do not believe it's impossible to bring down these gangs. What I won't do is engage in an expensive gimmick, the Rwanda scheme. If he believed it was going to work, he wouldn't have called an election.
Isn't it interesting how no one has mentioned the one thing which would gut the profit-making trade of, smuggling gangs, which would be safe and legal routes for asylum seekers?
Because we do need to smash the gangs. Keir Starmer.
This is also what's crazy, though, right? Because that net migration figure was legal migration, right? Now we're talking about the boats.
Completely different, and you can't be trusted to tackle immigration.
So why are the numbers this year 10,000 record numbers? Why is that?
Because this is a challenge. This is a growing challenge, but I've got a plan to deal with it because I'm going to put people on planes. What are you going to do with them? I can tell everyone what I'm going to do. You might not like it, but I've got a plan because we've got to have a deterrent. What are you going to do? Just tell everybody. What are you going to do with illegal migrants who arrive?
Please, can we please, gentlemen, we will lower our voices. Keir Starmer, please respond directly to Rishi Sunak.
There's a pattern of behaviour here. He said he would get waiting lists down. They've gone up. He said he would stop the boats. We've got record numbers coming. The promises he makes are not worth the paper they're written on. His plan is failing. We do have to deal with this problem, Stephen. We absolutely have to deal with it.
Get him on 10 pledges, Rishi. Come on.
Smash the gangs that are doing. I will never
Don't let him talk about broken promises.
Gangs that can't be taken down are these vile gangs. I've taken down terrorist gangs in my past. I've seen how it's done. I know it can be done. We'll have a border security command.
It's like hearing about sobriety from Keith Richards.
Get that done and stop this vile trade and those boats coming over.
If you want to take on a terrorist gang, take on the IDF, Keir.
I'm just going to call a pause there. Thank you very much. A very specific question to you, if I may, Rishi Sunak, and that is on the European Convention on Human Rights. If your Rwanda plan is blocked by the courts, and will this appear in your manifesto, that you would remove the UK from the European Convention on Human Rights? Is that part of your plan? Will that be in your manifesto?
I'm crystal clear. I believe all our plans are compliant with our international obligations, but if I'm forced to choose between securing our borders and our country's security or a foreign court, I'm going to choose our country's security every single time.
Excuse me, can I be clear? That is a yes.
I've been crystal clear. I will choose our country's security ahead of membership of a foreign court every single time.
Very, very clear answer. Keir Starmer, respond to that directly to Rishi Sunak, please.
No, if I'm Prime Minister, we will not...
Pretty nuts to hear people clapping. I'm going to get rid of an international court that protects your human rights. And everyone's like, yeah, that's so great.
Be a respected player on
Fuck
the global
human rights, I don't need them.
Who doesn't agree with international law. And those laws were put in place after the Second World War, after the horrors of the Second World War, when all governments, all countries came together and said, never again. And it was a Conservative government. Churchill's fingerprints are on this instrument. So important was it for the Conservative Party. This Conservative Party is a million miles away from the Conservative Party of old.
I have a direct question to put to you, Keir Starmer.
That was a strong response from Starmer there.
Similar, just to confirm,
really good. This is so good for like boomer centre-right Tories.
Of safe routes. Are safe routes for people crossing the Channel not the answer, Keir Starmer?
Well, I don't think anybody should be crossing the Channel. In relation to some countries, I do agree with safe routes. So, for example, just give me the example, Afghanistan, where everybody will observe the terrible scenes when the Taliban took over, and people who'd risk their lives to interpret for our forces, etc. I thought they should be allowed to come here to safety, and I supported the safe routes for them to do so. There are circumstances where I do believe that's the right thing to do. Ukraine is another example.
We just need to keep this brief. Yes or no to safe routes for those crossing the Channel?
Of course we should have safe routes, but when we've controlled our borders, we will be able to have a conversation about the right number to accept. We've been a very generous, compassionate country, but we talk about European conventions. 20 European countries almost now have agreed with my approach. Believe that you need to be able to
prohibitively expensive, childcare prohibitively expensive, stagnant and falling wages. We are utterly dependent on the flow of migrant labour, not just to keep our public services running, and in particular the NHS, but to keep our economy alive. I mean, that's why legal migration has been going up is because without that, we'd be in recession, a pretty bad one at that.
Yes, if that was
I'd also add
to do it in compliance with international law, of course. But just let me deal with this because...
So you do now agree?
So you...
now you've just changed your mind on this.
I thought we would not go to talk over each other.
So you do now agree with third country deals?
Thank you very much.
Could I just get a word in edgeways?
Mr Sunak, Mr Starmer.
At the moment, people arriving by small boats are not having their claims processed. By the end of the year, that means there'll be 100,000 people in hotels at taxpayers' expense who are not having their claims processed. That means one thing: they cannot be returned. And that's why returns have gone down by 40% on his watch. Now, he'll say again, well, don't look at the last 14 years. I know that was terrible. Don't look at that. I'm just looking forward. But I'm sorry, we're all living with the consequence of your awful decision.
Right. Thank you. So, gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for that. We are trying to get as many topics in. Thank you. No, thank you. I'm just going to draw a line under that. We are just trying to cover as much ground as possible. I'm sure you both understand that. Thank you. We're going to turn now to our fourth question from Omer from Manchester. Omer.
Thank you. I'm worried about the UK's lack of leadership on the world stage. I want our PM to be strong enough to take a stand even when it's hard. So what should happen next to stop these awful scenes we're seeing in Gaza?
Thank you very much indeed for that question, Omer. And,
Great
that
questions.
Question there, it has a wide range to it, but very specifically, it is about the Hamas terrorist atrocities of October the 7th.
Now, there isn't much that
and then
divides
what
Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer policy-wise on
this.
this.
Which we see on our television news every evening. So I'd like you both, please, to address that particular situation. A lot of people have been very uncomfortable with the stance that both of you have taken on this. How would you respond? First to Keir Starmer.
Well, Omar, the situation in Gaza is intolerable. It's catastrophic. Tens of thousands of people have been killed, a disproportionate number of women and children. So, Omar, what we need now is a ceasefire, a cessation of the hostilities straight away. And for these purposes, which is really important because it's a very grave situation, firstly, we have to get the hostages out. They've been held for a very, very long time, and I dread to think that the state they're in. Secondly, we desperately need humanitarian aid into Gaza, but desperately, it's catastrophic. Thirdly, and this is where the leadership piece comes in, we have to find a path to a lasting resolution. That has to be a two-state solution, and we need to show leadership on that. And I know that if we're elected into office, if we're humble enough to serve, that will be my solemn duty.
Rishi Sunak.
Is that why you whipped against your MPs being able to vote for a ceasefire earlier this year? Because you really need a ceasefire.
Right to defend itself in the face of the atrocious attack that they suffered. But right now, you're seeing that US have put a deal on the table, which we strongly support together with our allies to bring an immediate end to the hostilities, release hostages, get more aid in, and then build towards a lasting settlement with a two-state solution. We've led in providing more aid to Gaza, something I'm proud that we've done. Our troops have helped build the port that's being established. But more generally, the world is a more uncertain place. What Hamas is doing is indicative of the dangers we face, which is why I've made the bold decision also to lead, to increase investment in our country's defence, because I think that's necessary to keep you safe, everyone safe. It's
no difference between the two of them here. They've taken a bit of a different tone, but the meat of it is exactly the same. They've outsourced their foreign policy to Washington.
You raised a question there very specifically at the end of that statement, Rishi Sunak, raising the question about our security or otherwise under the potential leadership of Keir Starmer. Do you really think the man standing next to you is a threat to our national security?
No, I don't think the Labour Party can be trusted to keep this country as safe as the Conservatives. The world is a more dangerous and uncertain place than at any point since the end of the Cold War. I've made the decision to invest more in our defence, taking it up to 2.5% of GDP. Labour Party have not matched that. And worse than that, the person who would be Deputy Prime Minister under Keir Starmer does not believe in our nuclear deterrent, the ultimate guarantor of our security. So no, you can trust the Conservatives with our country's security, and my track record and our commitments prove that.
Keir Starmer.
This is shocking. Before I was a politician, I was the Director of Public Prosecutions. I was working on national security. I was dealing with terrorist plots. One of them...
I was Director of Public Prosecutions. And I nuked to jail.
They were going to be blown up.
He sent somebody to prison for 6 months for stealing a bottle of water.
Knowing how important it is.
Come on, Keir.
I certainly felt safer because of that. That was in the interest of national security, Aaron.
So the Prime Minister, who was at the time making money betting against the country during the financial crisis, that's what he was doing when I was acting on national security, to now say that somehow national security is safer in his hands is insulting and it's childish.
OK, thank you. A very brief response to that.
Well, I'd have rather had my job than work for extremists like Abu Qatada and Hizb ut-Tahrir.
The Crown Prosecution Service is an extremist organisation.
No, Abu Qatada and Hizb ut-Tahrir were who you work for as well, so people can Google that and have a look. But there's a clear choice.
Desperate.
I'm investing more in our country's defence, up to 2.5% of GDP.
OK.
You are not doing that.
OK.
So how can you tell people you will keep them safe when you're not willing to invest more in our country's security?
Thank you. We've explored both of those positions. I'm just going to draw a breath there. Just once again, we've got a quick fire question for you from Stephen from West Sussex, who sent us a question and asked, just very quickly, a very brief answer from both of you. Would convicted criminal Donald Trump be someone you as Prime Minister would want a special relationship with? Keir Starmer.
If he's elected President of the US, then we will deal with him. It's up to the people in the US to decide who they want.
Lock him up, deal with him.
And the special,
Even if he's a criminal.
The special relationship transcends whoever fills the post of Prime Minister and President because it's such an important, strong relationship.
Thank you. Rishi Sunak.
Yes, because having a strong relationship with our closest partner and ally in the United States is critical for keeping everyone in our country safe.
Thank you for those brief answers.
God, they're
Rishi
such
Sunak and Keir
arse
Starmer.
kisses of
We're going on to
America.
another
Sorry to be
question
crude,
now,
but
and
they
this one
really,
is
really
on
are.
The very pressing issue on climate change, and we're going to go to Claire from South London. Hi, Claire.
Thank you. The world is facing a climate catastrophe now. Both of you have broken promises on the environment. What are you doing to put climate at the very centre of your policies?
Thank you very much, Rishi Sunak.
Well, Claire, I have 2 young girls, and this is what they talk to me about more than anything else. And of course, we're going to tackle climate change and get to net zero. This election is about how we do it. And I don't think that British people should solve a global problem all by themselves, which is why I'm also prioritising our country's energy security and your bills. We've heard a lot about the cost of living challenges today, so I have made some decisions, bold decisions, that will mean that we can save all of you thousands of pounds, still meet our targets, and we can ensure our country's energy security. The contrast is clear at this election, because Keir Starmer will reverse all of the changes I've made. That's going to cost everyone and you thousands of pounds and make our country less energy secure by banning North Sea energy.
Okay.
And that, I don't think, is a right course for our country.
Rishi Sunak, thank you. Keir Starmer.
This £2,000 he keeps saying it's going to cost is absolute garbage. We won't go into the details of it. But Claire, let me address your point, because this is really important. A transition is coming that's very important when it comes, for example, to energy, a transition to renewables. I don't think we should just see that as a challenge. It's a huge opportunity, because if we go to renewable energy, that means cheaper bills. Renewables are cheaper, not just for the short term, but for the long term. It gives us energy security.
Not entirely true.
So it means that Putin can't put his boot on our throat, and the result you've all been feeling for the last 2 years. But it also gives us the next generation of jobs. Other countries have realised renewables is the future. They're in the race. I want the UK to be in the race. I want us to win the race. When it comes to hydrogen, offshore wind, solar, nuclear, the question I ask is why not?
Thank you very much. That's 45 seconds, Keir Starmer. I'm going to try and stick to the rules if we can. There's a very specific point that Claire makes in her question. Both of you have broken your promises on the environment. Will you acknowledge that, Rishi Sunak?
No. We're going to stick to the targets we've put in place, but we're going to do it in a way that saves you all money. I'm not going to impose thousands of pounds of costs on you to arbitrarily rip out your boiler, change your car, convert your home. When we've been talking about the cost of living challenges earlier in this debate, I don't think adding thousands of pounds of costs to you is the right thing.
The way in which they make retrofitting people's homes to make them more energy efficient and warmer, as though it's some kind of communist top-down, dictator. It's crazy.
Respond to that and address the issue of broken promises. Please respond directly to what...
It's hard to respond because he's making it up as he goes along. But let me do the best that I can, because the promise I made was clean power by 2030. It's one of my 5 missions, Claire, one of the most important things that I want an incoming Labour government with a driving sense of purpose to achieve. Clean power by 2030. That's the promise I've made. That's the promise I'll keep. It'll be in our manifesto. It'll be fully costed and fully funded. But the Prime Minister is slowing down on the climate change. The problem with that is not only is that inconsistent with our obligations, it will cost more in the long run.
OK, let Rishi Sunak
completely
respond
head
to
in the sand stuff.
Keir Starmer's going to reverse the changes I made. To install a heat pump now, if you don't need to, costs about £7,000 or £10,000. To convert your home, again, if you're in a terraced house in Darlington, £10,000. Changing your car sooner than America, Canada, Sweden, France, Germany, as he wants you to do. Thousands of pounds.
OK, let's
There's
Keir
a simple
Starmer
choice
respond
at this election.
Thank you.
If you think Labour are going to win, start saving.
Let Keir Starmer respond to those specific points. Keir Starmer.
Oh, applause for Rishi at last.
The company that the Prime Minister's been using to try and trail out these figures has done some analysis, which is actually published today, Prime Minister. You obviously haven't seen it. What they say, this is the company he's relying on, is that will cost more, the 2030 plan, if you're with the Prime Minister than with a Labour government. And that's been public. I don't know whether you've been too busy or you perhaps haven't seen it, but the very company that he relies on to trot out these false figures is actually saying it's more expensive
This is a bit in the weeds,
with the
isn't it?
Conservatives than with
No one really cares
Labour.
about which company said what.
Rishi Sunak.
I hosted a news show today. I have literally no idea what he's talking about.
See how much it will cost to convert your home. Go and see how much it will cost to install the heat pump. Go and see how much it will cost to change your car. Those are all the things that he's going to force you to do sooner than is necessary. You can go and see tonight the thousands of pounds that's going to cost you.
Let's tell you something. If I was Xi Jinping watching this debate, I would be laughing.
Yeah.
These guys going, no, you want to rip out the boiler. No, you want to rip out the boiler, but too slowly. And he's just like, I'm making, electric cars like they're fucking Pez dispensers.
Yeah. Bring me my Burberry bags.
This is a publicly owned
That's all you guys are good for.
That will generate energy, that will have investment alongside it. It'll be owned by the taxpayer, making money for the taxpayer, and drive us to renewables so that we can have lower bills, secure energy, and the jobs of the future. I also think that we should insulate our houses because I think people are paying far too much in their bills. And that was a project that was started 10 years ago and cancelled under the Conservatives when they said cut the green crap. We've lost 10 years. I'd get on with it and get your bills down because people are fed up with energy costs that have gone through the roof.
Thank you very much indeed for that. We've got another question.
Common
very
sense, but didn't get a clap.
question.
Doesn't feel intuitively true for lots of people, I think.
Now, hey, Miles.
Even though I agree with it.
Like many young people, I completed my final years of sixth form under COVID restrictions, started university under them, and I've had to deal with a cost of living crisis, a housing crisis, and an unstable world. What future can you offer my generation, and when will we become your priority?
Thank you very much indeed. Keir Starmer.
Well, Miles, what I think is really important is that you have the further education opportunities that you need, whether that's university or technical skills. I think either are perfectly, they're equivalent, they're really important. My dad was a tool maker, so he went down the skills route. I was the first.
Keir Starmer really doesn't sound good when he's trying to talk to or about young people.
Those jobs are there for you.
Really not
future,
fluent.
that you have the opportunity to get on. We'll build the houses so you don't have to be, 30-something, 35, 36 before you own a house under this government. But what I won't be doing...
First mention of housing, it's only taken nearly an hour.
Teenage dad's army, which would be what the Prime Minister would say, forget going on to university. He wants to send you off to do national service.
Thank you very much, Keir Starmer. Rishi Sunak.
We have an enormous amount to be proud of as a country, but we do need to do more to make sure our young people, like you, Miles, get the opportunities that they deserve. So that's why we will introduce a modern form of national service. And I think it's going to be transformational for young people in our country, giving them the skills and opportunities they need to succeed in life, fostering a culture of service in our society, bringing it together, but also strengthening our resilience and security for the future. And I think it is going to be something that's incredibly positive. But beyond that, I want you to have financial security. So when you get that job, when you save for that house, we make it easier, which is why I want to keep cutting your taxes so you can keep more of your money, build for a deposit for that first house, and not saddle you with £2,000 of higher taxes.
Thank you very much indeed, Rishi Sunak. Keir Starmer called the national service proposals a teenage dad's army. What would you say to that, Rishi Sunak?
Yeah, I think
Tell him why you don't think it's that.
Yeah, whatever you might think of it, it is an idea that's transformational for our society.
Well, the army don't like it.
But
they say
Keir Starmer, all he can do is sneer at it. Sneer at it because you don't have any ideas for the future. You don't have anything that's bold, that's going to transform our country for the better. And in fact, everywhere I've been, since I've made the announcement, I've had people talking to me about how they think it will be wonderful for their children, how they think it will change our country for the better, and it's an example of the bold action that I'm prepared to take to do things differently to deliver a more secure future. You don't have big ideas like that.
They've been in power for 14 years. And after 14 years, with a few weeks to go before the election, they come out with this desperate idea. It was such a brilliant idea. Why for 14 years has your government not lifted a finger to do it? It's a desperate attempt. Now the election's being called to get some attention and put something on the table. The other thing I would say is this. It is very important, Miles, is that the money the Prime Minister says he's going to use for this national service, he's going to take away from levelling up. Remember that promise in 2019, we're going to level up? When I was going to use the money for national service and the army say, and the military say, this isn't going to help us because we don't have the wherewithal to train people and it'll take away from our own budget.
Allow Rishi Sunak to respond.
It's not thought through, it's not sensible, it's desperate.
Could you respond very specifically on those points?
Actually, having spoken to lots of people from the armed forces, they're very supportive of the plan, and they think it will do brilliant for them over time to attract people into the armed forces.
Francois.
And actually, the money that we spend on levelling up is partly spent on spreading...
Johnny Mercer. It's a great idea, boss.
And I think this is the best way to do it. But again, you've had 14 years with nothing to do but think about the future, but you have nothing to say about it, and all you can do is talk about the past. And it's clear, there are no big ideas here. If we want to transform our country for the better and deliver a secure future, you've got to have leaders who are prepared to do big, bold things.
Rishi Sunak saying you're stuck in the past, Keir Starmer.
On the one hand, he says these are all the big ideas that Keir Starmer's coming up with and they'll cost a fortune. Then he says he hasn't got any big ideas. I do appreciate why he doesn't want to talk about the last 14 years. He's ashamed of the last 14 years. He's not said tonight in this debate one thing saying, this is our proud record, vote for me because we've got a great record. He can't say that. He can't say vote for Conservatives because we've got great leaders, burnt through 5 prime ministers. So all he can do is say, please look at the future. Please don't look at what we've done in the last 14 years.
Thank you.
We cannot have 5 more years of this. Got to draw a line. We've got to turn a page and start
Thank you very much.
Okay,
and Miles is listening very patiently to all of this, and I want to root this in his question, whatever the to and fro on that issue may have been between the two of you. You're both homeowners. The most common living arrangement for 18 to 34-year-olds is living with their parents. Do the young need to change their expectations of home ownership now? Do we have to be realistic about this? The young people of this country deserve some honesty. Rishi Sunak.
Yeah, it is too hard to own your own home, and I want everyone to feel what I experienced when I got the keys to my first flat, because it's a very special feeling, and we need to make it easier. And that's why we've delivered 1 million homes in this Parliament, and we'll keep building homes in the right place, but not concreting over the countryside as Labour would do. But crucially, we need to make it easy for you to save for that deposit. And that's why I want your hard work to be rewarded. I don't think we should be taxing you more, because that's just going to make it even harder for you to get on the property ladder.
Thank you.
On this more homes, less building, low tax.
Because for young people, the dream of home ownership has all but gone. The average age for owning a home now, Miles, is late 30s. That's shocking, because I know what your own roof over your head means for an individual. It meant the world to me when I was growing up. So we will build 1.5 million homes. Picking a number requires a plan. And if those homes are going to be built, we're going to have to change the planning laws to make sure we can get on with it. We're going to have to make sure our mayors and combined authorities have the powers they need to put the homes in the places. And we need to make sure the amenities are there, the schools, the health clubs, etc., to support those homes. So we've got
no one's mentioned the price of renting.
On the homes that will make sure, Miles, that you get that chance.
Obviously, housing supply is relevant, but it's all about home ownership.
Thank you very much indeed. There was so much that was in the question from Miles. Thank you very much indeed for that. Been a pretty serious evening in terms of what we've discussed so far. Just to both of you, apparently there is another big contest on this summer. For many, it's the biggest contest, and that is, of course, the Euros. We know you're both
Look at them both breathe a sigh of
fans.
relief when they get the
You
silly
are not
one.
the only leaders under pressure to win. and sometimes accused of not being exciting enough. So here, slightly with my tongue in cheek, if you'll forgive me, both of you, is a question that we've literally just had in from Gareth, who's on his way to Germany. What is the best leadership approach? Play it safe or take some risks and go for the win? What would be your leadership style? Rishi Sunak, quickly.
Waste of fucking time.
Not to give advice to Gareth Southgate, who, when I met him, we did discuss who had the worst job in Britain in terms of other people giving you their opinions. But I'd say you need to have a clear plan and you need to take bold action because you don't do anything without those things.
Thank you very much, Rishi Sunak.
Shit.
Briefly.
Game plan, good squad, and he's got both of those. I really think England are going to do really well this year. He's got a fantastic team, and I'm really...
Be radical or do you play it safe?
Sorry? You need a strategy for winning, so it depends who you're playing, what the issue is. That's what Gareth does.
Oh my God, he's making football boring, for fuck's sake. Politics has taken everything from me, not fucking football as well.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for both of those answers on the footy.
He turns Jack Grealish into like a robot.
And we go now to the candidates' closing statements. First of all, Keir Starmer.
Thank you. I don't offer you the gimmicks or unfunded promises that Rishi Sunak does. I don't pretend there's a magic wand that will fix everything overnight. Instead, I offer a practical, common-sense plan to change Britain. This election is about who our country works for. The simple, patriotic belief that Britain can be better and must be better. Imagine how you would feel waking up on July the 5th to 5 more years of the Conservatives. 5 more years of decline and division. The arsonists handed back the matches. Now imagine turning the page with a Labour government that rolls up its sleeves and gets on with the job, that puts the country back in your service. The choice at this election is clear. More chaos with the Conservatives or the chance to rebuild Britain with a changed Labour Party.
Thank you, Keir Starmer. Rishi Sunak.
Either Keir Starmer or I will be your Prime Minister, and a vote for anyone else makes it more likely that it will be him. Agree or disagree with me, you know what I stand for. I'll always have your back, as I did with furlough. But with Keir Starmer, apart from higher taxes, you don't know what you'd get, and neither does he. And we've heard a lot about change from him, but change to what? Keir Starmer is asking you to hand him a blank cheque when he hasn't said what he'll buy with it or how much it's going to cost you. In uncertain times, we simply cannot afford an uncertain Prime Minister. If you don't know what you're going to get with Labour, don't vote for it. On the 4th of July, choose lower immigration, lower taxes, and protected pensions. Choose a secure future with the Conservatives.
Thank you very much indeed, Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. Well, that's it. Quite a night. We've come to the end of our debate. You've heard from Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer head-to-head tonight. You can also hear what other parties standing in this year's general election have to offer in the ITV election interviews with Anushka Astana coming up next. The conversation will continue, not just here, on ITV, on our national and regional news. And next Thursday...
So that was it. We've got analysis for you coming in a moment. We'll break down the most interesting moments of that debate, who came out on top, if anyone did at all, though. First, however, if you're watching, one of those 14,500 people watching Novara Media right now, we are funded entirely by our audience. If you want to help build people-powered media, go to novaramedia.com/support. The link to do that is in the description below. We've said for a decade, as long as we've done this project, that you can't shift the political dial in this country without having a different kind of media, covering different kinds of stories in a different kind of way. We've got some highlights ready to go. This was the first laugh of the evening, and it came at Rishi Sunak's expense.
We are now making progress. The waiting lists are coming down. But what Keir Starmer didn't mention to you, which you did, Julie,
Wait, 7.2 million, they're now 7.5 million. He says they're coming down, and this is the guy who says he's good at maths.
Yeah, they are now coming down. They are now coming down.
7.2 when you said you get them down. 7.2 million, they're now 7.5 million. I'd like you to explain how they're coming down.
Because they were coming down from where they were when they were higher.
7.2.
And they're now on their way down. They are down, right? Yes, because the NHS was impacted by industrial action. And if it wasn't for that, 500,000 appointments would have been saved.
So it's somebody else's fault.
Sounded like my mum. Ash, what did you make of that?
Well, it is just painfully embarrassing for Sunak, because one of the things that he did when he laid out those, 5 missions, is that they were very tangible and you can measure whether or not he's met them. Now, obviously, inflation is coming down, but on something like NHS waiting lists, the numbers are stark. And he came a cropper because he's saying they're coming down. Keir Starmer just had to say, well, this is the number, it's higher than this number. And he looked like an absolute fool. I think he would have been better off not going there at all. He really did get hoisted by his own petard there, did Rishi Sunak.
Yeah, he didn't look good. We have here from Blah de la Blah, Super Chat, £5. Keith, I presume you mean Keir. There is some controversy about the name of his birth certificate. Just kidding. Keith is such an untrustworthy snake, he's making me want Rishi to take the gloves off, even though I also have zero trust in him. Funglutton.com. In weeks, Labour could be empowering Keir RPM. Refusing to explain what he plans for us and our country is contemptuous. I won't sign a blank check. Lots of super chats coming in. Not hugely supportive of Keir Starmer. I think he won by probably a split decision, but it wasn't a knockout of any kind. On immigration, Keir Starmer trotted out his latest line that Sunak is the most liberal prime minister ever when it comes to immigration.
The levels of migration are at record highs, 685,000. It's never been that high, save in the last year or two. The Prime Minister says it's too high. Well, who's in charge? Who's in charge? He's the most liberal Prime Minister we've ever had on immigration. We've never had numbers like this before. And he says that you can believe him on the boats. Nobody should be making that crossing across the channel. 18 months ago, the Prime Minister made a promise. He said, just like the NHS promise, he was personally accountable for it, that he would stop the boats. This year alone, 10,000 people have crossed on boats. That's a record number. So again, he's made a promise and he's completely failed to keep it.
Ash, for me, what was really interesting actually with that clip about immigration is that we had Starmer talking about, he's the most liberal PM ever, 1.3 million net migration over 2 years, 650,000 last year. That's legal migration, that's economic migration and, students and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But very, very quickly, both men just started talking about small boats. And, they were saying 10,000 people this year. Well, the absolute numbers, clearly, 10,000 or 650,000. It's almost like they're willfully trying to conflate and confuse this issue in the mind of the electorate. I don't understand. And before I pass over to you, they're not being honest about the costs of this policy of reducing migration. And look, people can say, I want low migration. That's fine. People are entitled to their opinions. But the facts are that if you have much lower migration than we have right now, much lower, you'll have higher inflation and you have to have higher taxation because, of course, you're funding people to become nurses and care workers and they'll want to earn more money and we'll have to pay more money for that. And I feel like those home counties, Tory voting silver foxes who just want the net zero migration aren't necessarily being told the truth about the costs of the kinds of policies that both apparently Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak want. So what did you make of that whole debate around migration? I thought that was the most interesting part in a way.
You know who won that section of the debate on immigration between Sunak and Starmer? It was Nigel Farage, because you're exactly right, Aaron. A discussion which starts by talking about illegal immigration. Then we're talking about asylum seekers. And then it turns out we're talking about the entirety of legal, regularized immigration, which includes people coming to work in the NHS, includes people coming to fill labour shortages, includes people coming over to study at British universities. And because the entire framing of that section wasn't, what kind of role do you want to see immigration play in British society and the UK labour market? Because it frames immigration as an inherent problem in itself. It's like sewage in the waterways. You always want less of it. It means that ultimately it's going to benefit right-wing nationalist populists who will come out and say, well, I want net zero. And I think this has been a much longer process than either of these two being on frontline politics. The way in which a particular discourse around immigration has completely dominated the political framing, because the honest discussion, you're right, is that, okay, if we take you at your word and we want to bring down all forms of immigration, right, what we're calling illegal immigration, asylum seekers, and also legal immigration, that is going to have an economic cost. We have an aging population, which means we're going to have more people aging out of the workforce, needing greater amounts of support from taxpayer-funded services, and fewer people in the workforce, keeping the economy going and also paying into the treasury, right? That's the shape of our society at the moment without immigration, which predominantly comes from younger working age people who contribute more into the system than they take out. All right. Those are just facts. This is before we get into anything about migration being a human right. This is before we get into, any of the cultural discussions that I know people on the right like to have. These are just the economic facts of it. And so unless you're talking about what the cost of lowering that is, the cost in terms of the labor shortages that already exist, the cost in terms of public services, which are already completely reliant on underpaid and overstretched staff, and also the cost in terms of the fact that we do have this aging population, it's an inherently dishonest conversation. Now, I would never praise Nigel Farage for actual honesty. All right. I think he says what he wants. For instance, today on the Today programme, he was saying, streets in Oldham when no one speaks English. All right. That's complete and utter bullshit. But one of the things that he said today, which I thought was very interesting, is that when he was being pressed on what it would really mean to bring immigration down to net zero, he said, well, if there are labour shortages in the public sector, there are labour shortages in the public sector. It's worth doing anyway. Now, I think that he's being glib about what that would really mean. But when you go back and you look at some of the post-Brexit polling of 2016, the Lord Ashcroft polls, there was a significant chunk of Brexit voters who would have been happy to see their own personal income reduced by 5% if it brought immigration down to zero, right? There is a cohort of voters out there who will take an economic hit, both on a societal level to their own pockets, to bring down immigration. That exists. And I think that Nigel Farage saying, okay, well, we'll pay this cost, but it's worth doing anyway. That's a bit more honest than what Sunak and Starmer were doing. So to end up with an immigration discussion, which is less honest than Nigel Farage, really is quite astonishing.
Yeah, that's so true. There's a super chat from Moore. I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to sort of respond to it through that prism. This is from Lothian McLean on immigration, with £10 super chat. You don't have to pay that much, Novara, but that's fine. Immigration debates are a deflection from being honest about the country's broken infrastructure, which is being held up by migrants. E.g., 1 in 5 NHS workers are UK non-nationals. And this is key, isn't it, Ash? I mean, you just talked about various public services not being able to exist without migrants. This isn't like an argument from the cultural left. This is just a simple reality. With 45,000 nurses short in this country already, if you want net zero migration, that figure is only going to get worse, by the way, because people are retiring all the time and we're not training people up. And by the way, the average nurse graduates with more than £50,000 worth of debt, so they tend not to actually stick around or even do it in the first place. That figure is only going up. And like you say, Farage say, so what? He wants privatised healthcare anyway. He doesn't care. But like you say, you've got somebody like Keir Starmer saying, I will save the NHS And at the same time, he's buying into the framing around migration and health policy. And look, I understand the argument where somebody says, well, we should be training our own people, they should be paid more money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Even if you think that, we have a 45,000 shortage with regards to nurses. Like I said, it's going up every year because of retirements. How do you think that's going to work? That will take a decade minimum to sort. It will cost huge amounts of money. So I've said about the costs of higher taxation, but also time. But the entire debate around migration is in no way, well, okay, we would like 250,000 people on average, 50, 60,000 asylum seekers on average, maybe in like a decade. That would be a sensible way of framing it from the right. Of course, we don't have that. They say, tomorrow we want net zero migration, which would be an economic cataclysm. That's not abstract. What does that look like? 10, 11% inflation, interest rates much higher. So that would be a problem if you want to buy a house. Or if you have a business, and of course our entire economic model is based on cheap credit. And then of course higher taxation to pay for all those people to be trained. But again, you said Farage is being honest. He's not honest about that bit, but then he doesn't have to because he doesn't want the NHS. We have other super chats here. Divine Chandrapala with £19.99. Thank you so much. Starmer has been in opposition for 9 years. He's been an MP since 2015. Leader for 4. How has he not got any substantive policies after all this time? The jabs at Truss are weak. We are clever enough to realise he's not debating Truss. Ash, you said, quickly respond if you can, you said that actually the more he mentioned Truss, the weaker it felt. What did you mean by that?
There was real diminishing returns, I think, to that Liz Truss jab. The first time, I think it landed a glove on Sunak. It's an embarrassment for the Conservative Party, a completely reckless mini-budget. And then when he kept citing Liz Truss as a reason to not engage with what he was actually going to do, I think some of those laughs in the room came at his expense. That was the feeling that I got. There's obviously not an exact science to this.
Yeah. We are going to move to Gaza in a moment. Great questions, by the way. And Gaza was a great question. This from Rosa with $4.99. The host's rephrasing of the audience member's question on Gaza by centering Hamas was wildly inappropriate. So let's see that framing right now.
I'm worried about the UK's lack of leadership on the world stage. I want our PM to be strong enough to take a stand even when it's hard. So what should happen next to stop these awful scenes we're seeing in Gaza?
Thank you very much indeed for that question, Omer. And that question there, it has a wide range to it, but very specifically, it is about the Hamas terrorist atrocities of October the 7th and then what unfolded after, the scenes of which we see on our television news every evening. So I'd like you both, please, to address that particular situation. A lot of people have been very uncomfortable with the stance that both of you have taken.
What did you make of that, Ash? Inappropriate or not?
Well, it was a way of making the question into a sort of both sidesism. So, Hamas did this. Israel Netanyahu's response did that. And I think that it took the actual political content out of it. Because I think what this gentleman Omar was saying was Israel is behaving like a rogue state. The scenes in Gaza are absolutely appalling. And what's happening right now is an invasion of Rafah, which Joe Biden said was his red line with Netanyahu. Right, he may as well have made that red line out of ticker tape. The effectiveness it's had in actually restraining Netanyahu and the IDF. So what would either of you do about that? And the reframing of that question into a kind of abstract banality, I think, helped create the wiggle room which both candidates exploited to full effect. I mean, we're going to see their answers again, I believe, but there's not much distance between them. There was a slight more emphasis on Rishi Sunak's part about Israel's right to defend itself. I can imagine why Keir Starmer would want to stay away from using that precise choice of language again after his hideous showing on LBC. But both of them were saying the exact same thing. Absolutely nothing. Whatever Washington says goes.
Yeah, that's a discussion for another time, I'm sure. But I couldn't help but feel, actually listening to both of them, David Cameron is slightly better when it comes to this stuff than either of them. Very strange world we're beginning to live in. Let's look at their answers to that question if we can. That's coming up now.
What we need now is a ceasefire, a cessation of the hostilities straight away. And for these purposes, which is really important because it's a very grave situation, firstly, we have to get the hostages out. They've been held for a very, very long time, and I dread to think that the state they're in. Secondly, we desperately need humanitarian aid into Gaza, but desperately, it's catastrophic. Thirdly, and this is where the leadership piece comes in, we have to find a path to a lasting resolution. That has to be a two-state solution, and we need to show leadership on that. And I know that if we're elected into office, if we're humble enough to serve, that will be my solemn duty.
Rishi Sunak.
Yes, Omar, it's an awful situation, and I'm pleased actually that Keir Starmer supported, alongside me, Israel's right to defend itself in the face of the atrocious attack that they suffered. But right now, you're seeing that US have put a deal on the table, which we strongly support, together with our allies, to bring an immediate end to the hostilities, release hostages, get more aid in, and then build towards a lasting settlement with a two-state solution. We've led in providing more aid to Gaza, something I'm proud that we've done. Our troops have helped build the port that's being established. But more generally, the world is a more uncertain place. What Hamas is doing is indicative of the dangers we face, which is why I've made the bold decision also to lead, to increase investment in our country's defence, because I think that's necessary to keep you safe, everyone safe. It's something that the Labour Party have not matched.
Quite a miserable. I'll start again. Quite a miserable response from both of those gentlemen. We've got some more super chats. I'll quickly get through those. Martin Stoller on tax. I feel both parties avoid the question of taxing the rich. How? Aaron and Ash raised the question. Hakan Osashlan with €10. It kind of felt like watching Spy versus Spy. No comment from me, Hakan. Ash, we've got a poll right now. Snap poll out from YouGov. Who do viewers think won tonight's debate? Headline response, Rishi Sunak wins 51-49. All responses, Rishi Sunak 46, Starmer 45, Dunno 9. So whichever way you look at it, Sunak slightly edges it. I mean, kind of interesting, doesn't really matter. You know, in 2019, Boris Johnson only just edged Jeremy Corbyn. But I suppose, you know, it wasn't a catastrophe for Sunak. And if that had happened tonight, obviously he's had a terrible start. He's had a terrible week. That would have made a really big difference. So who in your estimation was the winner and who was the loser tonight?
Well, that for me is actually quite a surprising result because watching the debate, I thought that Sunak came across as very tetchy. I thought that Keir Starmer definitely landed some blows on him. And I thought that the structure of the debate, where a lot of it was just saying, look at this really bad thing that's happening, would benefit Keir Starmer purely because he's not been part of the governing party for the last 14 years. I imagine the thing which really hurt him in this debate is the evasiveness. When it came to talking about what he'd actually do, he ducked almost every single opportunity to do so. I'm not saying that this will necessarily have an effect on voting intention, but it certainly had an impact on how people perceived this debate performance. So I guess even I'm surprised by how much the evasiveness has hurt him in the perception of this debate.
Yeah, I was surprised too. In terms of who the winner is, and one of the comments said, this is so boring. The debate was quite dull, right? And I feel like the winner, frankly, the winners are the Greens, Nigel Farage, Independents, and maybe George Galloway. You know, those are people who are frankly more interesting. They have more things to say. We do have on Friday, of course, this 7-way debate, including both the Tories and the Labour Party, but other major parties too. We'll be covering that. That's on Friday at 7:30, the BBC 7-way debate. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, do so. Get the notifications. Don't miss out on Friday. We, of course, have a daily show every day at 6 p.m. So tune in on Friday night. It'll be immediately after that. We've still got almost 10,000 watching. So good. And like I say, if you want to support our work, if you think what we're doing is worth your support, go to novaramedia.com/support. The link is in the description below. We are trying to build a new media for different politics. Ash, it was a pleasure covering this sometimes interesting debate with you tonight.
I love watching TV for my job, Aaron. Let's do it all the time.
Yeah, let's do it more often. We certainly will be before July the 4th. No knockout punch for either side tonight, but Rishi Sunak managed to evade what would have been a knockout blow. That counts for something. Obviously, we'll be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. for Novara Live. We'll see you then. Good night.